Today, it's time to recount the chaotic mess that is Splatoon 2's meta history, with by far the most amount of insane changes compared to any other game in the series so far. So much so that we aren't even going to be able to get to the week 1 meta in this episode, because the jump alone from Splatoon 1 to 2 truly changed everything in more ways than you can remember. So today, it's time to start the remake of this series by first going over the 2017 World Championship build, the weapon changes from Splatoon 1 to 2, and some other new additions to Splatoon 2's launch, including one so drastic it would have to be reverted down the line. We have a long road ahead, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see more from the Splatoon 2 meta history, and let's get started. So first up, the 2017 World Championships, also known as the World Inkling Invitational. This was the first ever competitive Splatoon 2 match, including the first time we ever had a spectator mode, by the way. Now, unfortunately, I don't know any version of this build that exists today. So all we have to figure it out is the testimony of the players playing in it, thanks for that, by the way, and an older build that was before launch, but clearly after Worlds has happened. This tournament even happened before the Splatoon 2 Direct, so many of the things shown off there, such as new weapons or specials like Baller, aren't even in this build. It is extremely limited, with the teams only having about an hour of experience and a brand new control scheme before the event. So what weapons were present in this tournament? From my knowledge, it looks like the only weapons that were available were the Splat Roller, Splattershot, Blaster, Splattershot Pro, Splat Charger, Dynamo, Dualies, Slosher, Splash, Octobrush, and Heavy Spiraling. That's it. Just 12 weapons that were available for players to use right off the bat. But were there any notable changes compared to Splatoon 2's launch? Well, obviously, since we don't know the full build, there could be more, but the most notable things that I'm aware of is that Stingray didn't allow you to use Squid Form at this time. In addition to that, there's 2 other smaller changes. Sprinkler seems to have a wider paint radius, but still has the Splatoon 2 rework of how Sprinkler works in this game, decaying over time. But the total paint output is definitely a lot larger than it was previously. The other change that I'm aware of from testimony is that Blaster does not have RNG issues in this version of the game. You can see a few clips where blasters are able to jump and shoot quite accurately during this tournament. One other main weapon that I heard was different was Dynamo Roller. It seemed like it was closer to its Splatoon 1 strength, but most notable seemed to be that the vertical swing looked to have a little bit more range than it does currently, and it felt a lot more broken from testimony. It's kind of sad to think the best vertical flick on Dynamo is probably locked to this build that no one has today. What would be the meta in this build? It's impossible to say for sure. It looked like Blaster, Slosher, Splattershot, and Heavy Spiraling did quite well, and I'd imagine with a little bit more time to learn the controls, Charger would probably do good too. But we'll never know for sure. If anything though, I'd say what's most notable about this event isn't what's there, but what's not there. The most notable thing exempt from this build is Ink Armor. With it completely absent, Splatoon 2 must have felt like a very different game, especially considering it's the most meta-defining option in this game's history. And later down the line, we'll see just how different the game is with it introduced. But before we can get to any of that, it's time to go through the laundry list. When moving from Splatoon 1 to 2, the devs clearly weren't happy with the balance of main weapons in the game, because there was a giant list of changes in what must be the largest patch we've ever had. And while I can't go through absolutely everything, I think it's a good idea that we break down these changes before we get started to really show just how much the game had changed. I'm going to break this down by class, starting with the shooters. Generally, the long-range shooters are what struggled the most. Jet Squelcher got a bit less range and paint, but slightly more damage and shot velocity. 96 lost in accuracy, range, and paint, and Splattershot Pro got better accuracy, but less range, paint, and ink consumption. Overall, pretty drastic nerfs to these weapons. Outside of that, it isn't too bad though. NZAP got a bit less paint for a bit better accuracy, 52 a bit more ink hungry, and painted a bit less for better accuracy. And finally, Sploosh, Junior, Aerospray Splash, and Splattershot all got slightly better accuracy. Yes, Splash wasn't perfect at this time, and velocity, but you guessed it, more ink consumption and less paint, with Aerospray also getting slightly less damage. The changes to the shorter range shooters weren't really that drastic. They're very small numbers number tweaks, all things considered. The semi-autos aren't doing much better. They had a bit different mobility in Splatoon 1 where they would strafe really fast when not firing and then slower when firing, which got removed in this game and led to an overall mobility nerf. In addition to that, L3 and H3 both got less paint, and H3 got less range and more ink consumption. And paint. While rollers gained a new addition with vertical flicks, which were solid for roller and carbon, that's the end of the positives for this class. Rolling now has a slower start that you have to build up speed in order to get your old rolling speed back. The ink consumption on roller and carbon roller is increased, and rolling dealt less damage on regular roller and dynamo. Carbon and dynamo also have significantly less horizontal range, and carbon does less damage, while dynamo also paints a lot worse. Dynamo at the start of Splatoon 2 is one of the worst main weapons in the entire series. I cannot understate how pathetic this weapon's range is. In general though, horizontal flicks were just gutted in this game, which really ruined a lot of their consistency. As for chargers, both Squiffer and Bamboo lost a tiny amount of range in exchange for getting a charge hold for Squiffer, alongside unscoped leader and charger. With Splatoon 2 not having damage up and therefore partial damage shots, partial charge kills were removed, but chargers did get their normal range scaling back, which in Splatoon 1 had a 20% penalty. E-Leader also got an extra shot, becoming the E-Leader 4K, but that's about all the positives for these two. Both Charger and E-Leader got less range, as well as more frames added to their charge times. E-Leader even moves slightly slower. This was a drastic rework that at the time had people questioning if chargers were bad, and paired with the many displacement specials and armor in this game would make it a rough experience for it even when these weapons did see use. Most people know that the one-shot blasters got hit hard. Luna and Normal Blaster both lost major radius size, got harsher ink efficiency, and horrible jump RNG, while all one-shot blasters had their max damage range lowered from 80 to 70. While Range Blaster got to keep its radius size since it was already smaller in Splatoon 1, it got all the other nerfs. In Splatoon 1, this class was quite good, but paired with the indirect changes in the introduction of ink armor, these would drop off significantly. Rapid Blasters, on the other hand, lost their variable outside damage, but got consistent spark, indirect, and maximum direct damage, as well as slightly better ink efficiency, being one of the few weapons to get an overall positive change. Brushes in Splatoon 1 could damage overlap to get slightly higher damage, but that's completely removed in this game. In exchange, both Ink Brush and Octobrush got slightly more damage, but it's overall a simplification and nerf of the weapon class. Sloshers had the least amount of changes. All of them strafed slightly slower. However, Try got more range, and Machine had its direct drop-off damage increased to 52, meaning it would always kill in 2 direct hits. We'll get more to Try later, but for the most part, Sloshers are just slightly worse. Splylings are also incredibly gutted for some reason. All Splylings got a major nerf to their strafing speed when charging and firing, as well as a heavily nerfed curve with the ability of run speed up. This made all Splylings incredibly sluggish at the start of the game. Mini also took longer to charge, painted less, and had more time before you could recover your ink. Heavy Splyling also painted less, and Hydra took longer to charge and painted less. Besides Mini, none of these were even that good at the end of Splatoon 1, which made these changes feel extra awful. By the way, if any of this wasn't enough, a good portion of Splatoon 1 weapons were also just not available at launch, like Range Blaster or Bamboozler. So on top of a bunch of nerfs to these weapons, players had to wait a while just to start using them. This also included the new weapon class of Brellas, which were available in single player exclusively, but not in multiplayer for a while. By the way, it's worth noting that the single player has the launch balance of every single weapon that you can access in hero mode, at level 1 of course. So if you own Splatoon 2 and want to get a feel for just how much weaker things are, give it a shot. Unsurprisingly, when you take the vast majority of weapons in the game and drastically nerf them, it didn't really feel great. It'd be beating a dead horse at this point to say that these changes were an overcorrection and a mistake that even today is still being made up for. Finally, to wrap up this episode, I want to talk about a few new things that were introduced in Splatoon 2. Curling bombs originally were always at their maximum explosion size, and charging them just made them explode closer to you. Curling Rush would actually maintain this larger side after Curling Bomb was nerfed, but this made it one of the best subs at the start of the game. Lightweight weapons were also introduced in this game, which gave certain weapons like Junior and Sploosh slightly faster movement speed by default. And Cold-Blooded existed for a short time. It was a stackable ability that only influenced location time. Nowadays, this is merged into Bomb Defense DX. Bomb Defense could also reduce the damage from specials in this game. Finally, in terms of ability changes is of course Quick Respawn Stealth Jump nerfs, with Quick Respawn no longer working if you got a kill ahead of time, and Stealth Jump no longer having infinite range, but also no longer slowing your jump. In other news, the maps were really bad on early Splatoon 2. Look at Black Belly Rainmaker. What are we doing?
Wow, they have it!
However, the most notable system change here is the delay when recovering your health was increased from 1 to 1.5 seconds. This dramatically boosted the power of chip damage weapons since it took much longer of a time to recover from small amounts of damage, making it more likely to work off of others. This greatly boosted options like rapid blasters or burst bombs for instance, but also benefited certain specials like Stingray. Honestly, this change just sucked. You had more downtime and chip damage was way too annoying and broken here. I'm glad they eventually changed it back, but it did serve to make every issue in the early game feel way worse. Well, with that out of the way, you can see just how much the game changed before we even hit day one. By comparison, Splatoon 3's launch basically changed almost nothing besides a few small bomb nerfs. It's insane to think about how different this was, and honestly, I'm glad it was a one-time thing. I'm sure all this effort to rebalance the game will result in an amazingly healthy launch state, right? I guess we'll find out next time. Thanks for watching.